Welcome or welcome back to another episode of Through the Journey with Jennifer. And I am continuing this series where I'm talking about marriage, divorce, separation, because this is a season that I am in. I've seen a lot of other women talk about it, and I just wanted to share a few things as well as my experience, and maybe even offer someone some type of encouragement that may be going through some of the same things. Today, I want to talk about why people wait until divorce to become their best selves. Social media can be a good thing and a bad thing. Um, but through my scrolling, I have seen, a lot of women who get divorced and they're like, this is me, while I was married, and now this is me after divorce. And, they have a significant weight loss, which is a great thing, you know. And I'm not knocking anyone, I'm not judging anyone. I just really wanted to have this discussion and talk about it. They had this uh, divorce glow up, the weight loss, the confidence, the self care, the rediscovery. And like I said, I love that for the women that I've seen, but I did have some questions about it because, I was in my season when I was ready to walk away. And, you know, I started asking, why did it take the relationship ending for you to start choosing yourself? Because if I'm being honest, I I think that's part of the problem. And I saw that for myself and in my own journey. Somewhere along the way, we stop caring for ourselves inside of the relationship. Um, we stop prioritizing our health. We stop pouring into our growth. And we stop showing up as our best selves over the years. And then when everything falls apart, that's when we finally decide to become who we were really always capable of becoming. And I had to check myself on that because I realized, even though I was going through the emotions in my marriage and I was ready to walk away, I realized I didn't have to wait until my marriage ended to start living. I didn't want to fall apart, just to rebuild later. So I made that decision. I was going to choose myself in the middle of everything that I was going through in my marriage, not after, not when it was convenient, not when everything was over, right there in the hard. And I started focusing on my health, my peace, my happiness. Um, I started doing things that made me feel like me again. And it wasn't about proving anything to anyone, it was about not abandoning myself anymore. It's funny because, I used to tell my husband, I'm trying to be outside, trying to be outside. And he's like, what the hell is being like, what is outside? Like, he's like, that don't sound, you know? And I'm like, no, let me break this down for you. Um, you know, through everything we've been through and with my therapy, I really had to explain to him and break down what being outside meant for me. Everybody may have a different version, but let me break it down and explain to you what my outside looks like. You know, I was a young mom. Okay. I was a mom at 15. I did not get that typical teenage life. You know, I was responsible for another human being at the age of 15 when I was a child myself. And um, I had to grow up. I had to be an adult at 15. And from there, it was working, it was school, um, marriage, more children, work, school, house, you know. So all these years of giving and doing, I really didn't have a life outside of the home. You know, it was always about my kids, it was always about my husband, it was always about school, it was always about work. So, you know, and I said this before in previous videos, like when I turned 40, it was like all of that was hitting me. Like, you know, everything that I had gone through and to where, you know, I am now is like the kids are grown. I get to live my life, you know. You know how you see the videos, the memes of how, you know, yeah, everybody was like, yeah, you shouldn't be having all these kids at a young age and da 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 da. But here I am 40 and I'm outside living my life, you know. That's how I feel, you know. But when I talk about being outside, it's not being outside running the street shaking my ass. No. Being outside means if I want to take a Friday off and get in the car and go somewhere and drive for the weekend, um, if I want to book a flight and I want to go on a trip, you know, if I want to go to this concert or if I want to go to this show or whatever it is that I want to do, I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to have fun. You know, I'm trying to live my life because that's what I'm supposed to do. And I think, you know, looking back and looking at other women in my family and that I've seen get to their 50s and their 60s, and it's like they didn't do anything. You know, they just stayed in the house. And it's like I don't see that for myself. I did that. I did that. I raised my kids. You know, I had my career. I went to school. I am just trying to have a good time, you know? And I really had to explain that to him to help him understand because you had that life before we got married, you know? You did not have young children. You can get up and go when you wanted to. Um, I didn't have that. So now that the kids are older, this is my outside. This is me getting out and doing things and having fun and living my life. And it's like, I want you to be a part of that. But if that's not what you want to do, I'm not going to force you. You know, but here's some truth. You can't keep neglecting yourself and then expect your relationship to thrive. Um, we talk about happiness and finding your happy, you know. Every day ain't gonna be a good day. Some days you just gonna go through some shit, let's just be honest. Um, being happy is a choice. Being happy is up to you. And another thing that, you know, me and my husband had to have a discussion about was happiness. Because I can't depend on him to make me happy. He can't depend on me to make him happy. We can only add to each other's happiness. That happiness has to come from within. And I think we forget that, or we don't understand that sometimes because we're so fixated on our significant other doing something or saying something or just trying to make us happy. That's not healthy. That's not healthy. You are responsible for your own happiness. And then when it comes to, no longer abandoning yourself, you can't place that blame. You can't blame the relationship for everything you stop doing for yourself. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about that. In marriage, it's not about what they did or what they didn't do. A lot of times it's about what you stop doing for yourself. And when I shifted that for myself, a lot of things started to change. No, it wasn't overnight. No, it wasn't perfect, but I changed. And that mattered and made a difference. Not just for me, but even for my husband. Because he started to see that. And from that, we started to have more open and honest discussions. And everything that I just talked about and I just shared is some of what I poured into this character, Alex, in my book, I Choose Me. She realizes that she's been pretty much pouring into everyone else, her marriage, her career, her family, her responsibilities. But she wasn't pouring into herself, and it takes, something almost drastic happening for her to realize, I have to choose me. Yeah, and that's where her power comes back. And that's where your power comes back when you start choosing yourself. Take away the blame, take away the woulda, coulda, shoulda, and really start pouring back into yourself. Start taking care of yourself. Start healing. Do that work for yourself. It really made a big change in my life for me, mentally and physically, when I said I choose me. And from that, I know my husband was like, oh, that is so selfish. That's okay. That's okay for you to think that I'm being selfish because this is different from you. This is different for you. This is not the Jennifer that you're used to, because I've grown, I've changed, and our children are older. So, no, I'm not going to be the same Jennifer. And I don't expect him to be the same either. You know, we're both 45. We've been married for 23 years. And we've been through a lot. We've been through a lot. And everything that we've been through, I think what, what has kept us together is that we continue to choose each other. And, we joke sometimes, and it's like, oh, I can't stand him. Oh, he gets on my nerves. Yeah, he does. He does get on my fucking nerves sometimes. Excuse me. He drives me crazy. But at the end of the day, that is my husband, and I love him, and I choose him. But I also choose me, to pour into myself and to take care of myself. Because if I can't take care of myself, if I don't pour into myself, I'm depleted and I have nothing to give you. And I think as women, we forget that sometimes because we just try to keep going and keep pushing and keep doing. We got to stop. We got to stop. We got to pour into ourselves because we are no good to anyone else when we are depleted. But I'm going to keep on with this topic. So next week we're gonna go a little bit deeper, and we're gonna talk about, yeah, we're gonna go a little deeper because marriage isn't just about love. It's about endurance. It's about growth and becoming. And I'm going to talk about what I believe marriage really requires. Um, and that's the part that nobody prepares you for, nobody, really talks about.